Y'all need a pilot?
Hello everyone and welcome back to Back Lot Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel and today I am joined by my co-host whose toupee I have yet to remove, but I will in the future, of course. This is Tanner Dykstra and I am Tucker Hazel and we are here to talk about Flight Risk, the latest from director Mel Gibson.
Oh.
He's back, ladies and gentlemen, Best Picture winning director Mel Gibson.
Beloved ambassador to Hollywood, Mel Gibson.
Flight Risk is his latest cinematic masterpiece, and we are here to delve deep into its themes and characters and filmmaking. Tanner, we have been interestingly awaiting this film because it feels like a January movie. It's got those vibes dripping, and we have now finally seen it. What do you think of this movie?
Oh, Tucker. Well, first of all, I think I just need to ask: do y'all need a pilot?
Y'all need a pilot?
Y'all need a pilot.
Oh.
So, Tucker, you say all these things, and here's what I will say. I would have loved to have had a great time with Flight Risk. Unfortunately, I think Mel has lost the sauce, particularly with, or at least specifically with this one. I think this is quite a misguided attempt to maybe follow in the tracks of your dumb VOD horror, or not horror movies, VOD action films, and even try to maybe make your own sort of Speed or Die Hard all 30, 40 years later. It feels completely misguided to me in a lot of areas. The characterization, the craft of many elements of this film really do not hit for me when they really should. Especially if you're trying to ape those stylings, if you're trying to, and also the idea of the film, because that's what hooks you initially from the trailers, is this. They're stuck on a plane together, it's fucking 90 minutes long, and all the action takes place in this enclosed space. And think of all the wacky things that are going to happen. I think it betrays its premise a little bit. I think the greatest sin of Flight Risk, of which there are numerous in my mind, is that it's boring for a good chunk of its runtime.
Yeah. I don't disagree with almost anything you said, but Tanner?
Yep.
Had a great time with Flight Risk.
Sure.
Had a totally charming, surprisingly good time with it, because I actually found myself more compelled by the parts that I think other people will call boring than I was expecting to. I think there are a lot of ways in which this movie betrays the reason you are going to the theater to see it. Mark Wahlberg is barely in it.
Yes.
There's very few moments of action, and when they do happen, they are resolved incredibly quickly.
Yep.
But there is this underlying tension of just the general premise of being in the sky, running out of fuel. What are we going to do? These people don't know how to fly the plane, that I found engaging enough to pull me through. And then I also found some surprisingly solid character work and relationship building between the two characters who are not Mark Wahlberg that ended up keeping me surprisingly engaged throughout the whole thing. And also, it's very easy to sell me on something that is this short with for me, a very compelling premise just on face value. And I do think that it delivers on getting me into the theater. It's not a movie I would recommend to people, though, because of the things that we're going to mention, where when someone's watching this trailer and expecting this movie to hit certain beats, it does, but it's also got 60 minutes of other stuff in it that is not what most people are going to go to this movie for. So I totally understand it being a miss, but I was pleasantly surprised by Flight Risk, and I think that that's going to be something you don't hear a lot of people say.
Sure, yeah.
But I was sitting in the movie and I'm like, you know what? This is a good time. And I do think there are some areas where on a filmmaking level it's shaky, but I also think most of it is just fine filmmaking. It's just fine craft level stuff. And then I was interested enough in the characters to pull me along.
Okay, let's talk about our characters. Our characters are, of course, aside from Mark Wahlberg, who is truthfully unnamed. He's credited as Daryl Booth, but that's not his real name, as we all know. But the characters that you were saying that
what we'll refer to him as whenever we say his name is Booth. Well, the name is Booth with air quotes.
Oh, I see. I think I'm going to call him Mark Wahlberg, if that's all right with you, Tucker.
Fair enough. Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, Mark Wahlberg. The characters that I think we will talk about, and we'll get to Mark Wahlberg in due time, are Michelle Dockery as Madeline Harris and Topher Grace as Winston. Not Overwatch Winston, just regular old Winston this time around. And I think that Michelle Dockery is the best part of the movie. I think.
Easily. That she is acting freaking marathons around these two wacky gentlemen.
Yes. She is of course given this role of like the badass spurned. I guess she is. They're federal marshals. They're marshals in this one.
Something like that. Something marshal. They say the word marshal a lot.
Exactly. That's her role. Is that she is sort of no nonsense. She has this torrid history with a past case that has left her a little wary and feeling she needs to prove herself on this specific instance of this case, transporting our prisoner Winston. Yeah. And I think that she is the one that carries you through a lot of the movie, or carried me through a lot of the movie. But then I think the direction of the film from Gibson's point, really just starts failing her time and time again as the film drags on. Especially when I should be feeling connected to her, personal struggles, to her relationships, not only with Topher Grace, but of course with the people on the other end of the phone that she is talking with more and more as the film drags on. Yeah. And I would use that word drag very specifically. Sure. I think that that's kind of my
that's an aviation point. That's an aviation term.
Good point.
Drag.
Good point. I think that's kind of my main takeaway is that I think she shows promise and even a little bit of action lead charisma towards the beginning of the film, but really kind of melts away as the film gets more and more misguided.
Sure, yeah, I can certainly see that. I think in that first half of the movie, I would say I was able to. Well, actually, no. You know what, Tanner?
Yes.
I disagree.
Oh, okay.
I disagree with you. I think that her character comes a little bit more into her own as we learn more about her past and a little bit more about the things that are emotionally sort of weighing her down, that sort of recontextualize. Seeing her from the beginning, she's kind of just like the stereotypical straight-laced officer, military person. Yeah. And as we learn more about her, of course, there are emotional reasons, history reasons why she's sort of keeping herself tampered down, why she's sort of trying to put some distance between herself and others that I think actually do end up endearing me to this character even further. And I would also say somewhat similar things for Winston, though he does not get as much character building. The truth of the matter is the least prominent actor in this movie, being Michelle Dockery, she is the main character of this movie. She gets the most screen time, frankly. She gets the most development. She is the one on the sticks of the plane, not tied up for most of the movie, which applies to both of her gentleman co-stars. And I found myself really compelled by her. And I also was like, she's doing a really good job acting in this movie that, from everyone else's point of view, I think, including Mel Gibson, including Topher Grace and Mark Wahlberg, is very corny, is doofy, is silly. Both of them are cracking jokes a lot. Yeah. She is serious, and she is taking this role seriously, and I think she does. She outshines this movie. Her performance in this movie is better than the rest of the movie combined.
I think she recognized that she's playing the straight man of the story effectively. You have of course the two zanier sides of the film that are meant to be funny, and I'll get to that in due time. But yeah, I see what you mean. I think my thing I just go back to is I feel like as she needs to portray more and more things on her mind, I think it comes in tune with the film being pulled in a lot of different directions, especially as it should narrow a little bit more, come down to the wire as the film winds down.
Sure.
I think that especially as we continue opening these new books, these new areas of conflict or mystery, I think that her performance maybe gets a little bit less specific for me.
Sure.
So that's kind of all I have to say about that, is that she's fine enough, and even the bad elements of her performance I feel can be really chopped up to the editing process of this film, which I think is quite poor in moments. Sure. So let's talk about Topher Grace quickly, and then Mark Wahlberg. So Topher Grace here, he is in real Eric Foreman from That 70s Show mode, and it works for me. Sometimes. I think some of his smarmy, snarky comments are funny. I think, again, as the film goes on, you get more and more tired of his kind of one-bit kind of thing, and then he gets, spoilers for Flight Risk, stabbed a couple of times, and that's when he gets a little bit more earnest about coming to reckon with his mortality, and those jokes kind of fade away. But for a good 2/3 of the film, he is I can't believe this is freaking happening to me. Why don't you just freaking shoot this guy, huh? And those are the parts that don't really work. When he's sitting in the back and he's trying to get their attention, and he's I freaking know, I got an itch on my nose or something. Like
Yeah.
that's when he's like playing a little bit more pathetic Eric Foreman type of thing that Topher Grace can excel at.
Yeah. It is interesting because he is the reason why I shouldn't like this movie.
Sure.
Is especially from these cold opening scenes with him by himself in a what to me looked like an AI generated motel. And apparently I'm not the only one that noticed.
We should talk about it.
Mentioned online. And he's sitting by himself in this motel room talking to his microwave and saying these dumb lines that are like, oh, in my mind, I read it as like, oh, he's just like me. He eats chicken noodle ramen and he has a bad time because his microwave doesn't work all the time. And like, boy, isn't he a relatable character for this reason? And I was listening to these lines and be like, man, is this what this movie is? And for his performance, yeah, for the most part, I do think that that dynamic between him and Harris does, I think, evolve over the course of the film. I actually do buy them sort of bonding over this experience and becoming like the only person the other one can trust. Of course,
I understand that.
They learn a little bit about each other's past that like elucidates a little bit more about either one of them and the reasons why they've fallen into this role. And so I, especially by the end when he is sort of hanging on to the edge of dear life and has morphine injected to him, I was like, okay, like I believe that Harris doesn't want him to die, and I believe that he trusts her to be someone that can guide him because he is the wieneriest man ever put to cinematic screen.
Tucker, this is Topher Grace we're talking about. He doesn't.
But like this is the top of his echelon of that. I really think, and I agree that there's a lot of times when the amount of jokes and the amount of lines and his delivery doesn't work. Yeah. But man, oh man, is he committed to it.
I mean, yes.
He does not break this form for the entire thing. And so for me, it feels intentional. And so I end up becoming endeared to it over the course of the film. But I totally admit there are moments in this movie where I'm just like, shut up. I don't want to listen to you. Get out of my head. Get out of my head. Get out of my head.
I mean, Mel clearly told him, like, listen, this is the guy that you're playing. Like you have like kind of one mode, one bit that you're going to be operating for most of the film. And it is meant to be, I don't know, is it meant to be annoying to the audience or is it meant to be funny?
I think it's kind of both. He's the comic relief of the movie.
Yeah, and I guess he's supposed, like to your point, Tucker, he's supposed to kind of be the everyman. He's supposed to be commenting on how ridiculous this whole situation is. A lot of the time. So in that moment, maybe it's not a question of like annoying versus funny, but like more relatable is kind of what they're aiming for.
Yeah, but relatable in the misguided Hollywood way of like course. No one actually acts like that.
Exactly.
No one actually acts like that. Shut up.
But he's saying he's saying exactly what we're thinking. Like, why don't you just freaking shoot that guy?
Yeah. And to the movie's credit, in terms of people acting and reacting accordingly within the corny ridiculousness of flight risk, I actually think that like the characters' motivations and the way they act is like surprisingly straightforward. I'm like, I see. That makes sense. Like you would react that way. You would be like over the top, like confused in this situation, or like you would mess up in the situation because you are a little bit flustered or confused by the situation. So I actually, from a screenplay standpoint, I didn't feel like any of the characters were particularly stupid. Like even him.
I got to disagree there. But because like, and this is a thing that you can do for a lot of movies, and it's really just a matter of like if you're bought in versus if you're bought out. But like, for me, I'm like, why are you not shooting him? Why are you not tying him up immediately? Why are you not checking on him? That's something that drove me.
I agree. Yes. That is definitely the biggest one.
They're just like locked straight ahead, and you're seeing him like clank around in the back. Like, hey, why don't you turn around for a second to see if the killer that you guys have trapped 5 feet behind you is trying to do anything? Like maybe once or twice in this 90-minute movie, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, that does bring us to Mark Wahlberg, who is the biggest missed opportunity of this movie.
Oh, 100%.
The movie is sold on the back of his face being on the poster, and
specifically this part of his face to this part of his face.
Yes, because there are two things about this character, and of course we'll get into a couple other ones, but two major things.
Yep.
Number one, he's bald, He has a bald cap that is so fucking terrible and so poorly matched to his skin tone and blended into his forehead.
The first time he's like trapped up there and he's doing the forehead wrinkles, he's got his eyebrows up, doing the Marky Mark kind of face, and like the wrinkles stop at his hairline. I'm like, oh brother.
Here's the thing that really drives me crazy about that is just don't have him be bald.
Yeah.
If you can't make it look that good, he can be a deranged, crazy bad guy who's not bald. Yeah. That's allowed.
Why? That's a great question, Tucker. Why make him bald? Is it supposed to make him scarier? Is it like a Mark Wahlberg control thing of him being like, well, I'm not playing a good guy in this movie. I'm trying to control my image, so I should look very different if I'm playing a bad guy. I think that's gotta be it.
Maybe, but to me, it is all centered around the moment in which they really discover that he's not who he says he is.
Yeah.
And he is actually bald, which is, he was hiding that because he was wearing a toupee, and that also indicates that he was hiding who he was, so.
Correct. He's wearing a disguise for these people. He's wearing a disguise for these people who don't know what he looks like.
True, yeah, and they have no connection to him.
No.
So that's number one. Terrible bald cap, unnecessary bald cap, and I think that is on like a craft perspective, that makeup, that costuming choice is like the most objectively bad thing about the movie, because it is glaringly obvious whenever you're looking at that character that like his skin tone is different from here up.
And here's what I'll say is that I'd be more willing to forgive that specific thing if I were more in line with it being like, oh, a dumb, like, maybe more earnest but like low budgeted kind of thing. But like that's just not the vibe I get from the film, and we might differ on that. But Tucker, I think I know where you're going to go with point number 2 here.
Point number 2 is he is incapacitated or tied up
I see.
For 70% of this movie.
This is also a great issue. I have one more I want to talk about, but yes, continue.
There are other things, but really the tension of this movie comes in waves between him being knocked out and tied up and then waking up or letting himself loose. And it is a really frustrating process to watch, because it does mean that his dynamic with both Winston and Harris is not explored for a lot of the movie, because he's knocked out for a lot of the movie. His performance, which is ridiculous, and he's hamming it up, and I'm having a good time when he's like really leaning into it, is underutilized within the course of the film, because he is incapacitated for probably the majority of the runtime.
Yes.
And also it means that the only like real moments of tension come every once in a while when he does wake up. And then, to both Winston and Harris's credit, they get him knocked out pretty quickly. Every time he wakes up.
The issue with him is that he is very incompetent versus a very competent character. Which is kind of the opposite of what you go for in a villain in like a Die Hard or a Speed, is that you want to make your villain very competent. And what they instead opt for, because I agree on all points, I don't really have anything to add about the fact that what adds to this film's dramatic, what's the opposite of inertia?
I don't know, just be... Inertia, Tanner.
Inertia. This film does not have a dramatic motivation in any respect, really, and it's largely due to him being absent. Is the characterization of Marky Mark's Daryl Booth.
Yeah.
So this is what really rubs me the wrong way, and it's really where I take into consideration like this being like a new Mel Gibson film. Mm-hmm. There is, and this is a sensitive topic, and I do apologize, but it's really key to the movie. It's something that comes up a lot. His main motivation for like being a psycho guy is that he really wants to, and I'm sorry, rape both characters.
Yeah.
He says
definitely.
There are probably, I don't know, Tucker, how many would you estimate? A dozen lines or more to this effect? Like they are really harping on the fact that like that is what he wants to do. And hey, Mel Gibson, there's a little screenwriter. I know you didn't write this film, but a creative team behind Flight Risk, who clearly think that this is like, this movie is supposed to be fun dumb. Do you agree, Tucker? That's what they're aiming for.
Yeah.
And so that's not fun for a villain. That doesn't make a fun villain. It makes it makes it feel very icky and gross that he's like, hey, when I get out of here, I'm going to rape both of you and then brutally murder you. I was like, He's not fun. It's not. I don't feel like really intimidated because it is Marky Mark giving a terrible performance. If you want to really go push the psycho side of it, get a better actor than Mark Wahlberg, for crying out loud.
Sure.
But Mark Wahlberg, you bring in to do a dumb fun villain, and that's not how you write a dumb fun villain.
Yeah. Well, I think it's mostly that those script writing elements of his rapist quality and the seriousness of that topic are at odds with the rest of the performance, which I do think in most of the moments that he's given, most of the line deliveries that he's given, most of the facial expressions he's given are that doofy, crazy, dumb thing.
Yeah,
because there are these moments when he's
bald cap on. It's funny to look at him, and then he has this really gross bent to him that makes it not fun to watch.
Well, I don't know. I think the reason why I wouldn't criticize the movie about that, though I understand it certainly being at odds, is because he's just a really creepy, weird guy, and that he is the villain of the movie, and him having this darker side to him, I think, doesn't match the tone. I agree, but I also think that it's like he's the villain, so like I'm kind of okay with him saying any heinous shit he can because he's the bad guy and is gonna get his comeuppance by the end of it. Though, again, to what I was saying, most of the performance is not these, like, I understand that it sort of like infects the rest of the performance, certainly knowing that like that's an element of his character, but most of his character is him cackling and making one-off jokes, and to me, like, one of the funniest moments of the movie, or parts of the movie, is him, like, chipping away at the strap, and he's going...
Yeah, he's got a dumb face.
He's like gumming his tongue.
I will say,
and I'm like,
I think the biggest laugh I had in the entire film is when he first realizes that he's got his hands cuffed up like this, and he's like, "Hey, no big deal to me, man. I can hang out like this all day." And then we like almost hard cut to him. I got to back up for the mic a little bit for this. We hard cut to him, and he's like, "That is the funniest part of the whole movie is when is that jump cut. So I will give credit there. I do have to say for the rest of the movie too, very poorly edited. Little to no like consistency. The continuity is completely fucked in this movie.
Definitely true. Yeah.
At the beginning,
the funniest moment. Actually, I think the funniest thing in the movie is when Booth and Harris have their headphones on, and Winston is like mimicking what they're saying. He's sitting there. He's going and. Hit the whatever, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's funny line delivery.
He's down home pilot, and if you were my cousin, we'd be married already.
Yeah, and it's generally a funny moment. Yeah. But then you hard cut to the opposite angle, and his hands are down. And
this
I'm like,
is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you're right. There are lots of moments of bad continuity in it, and to me, it reads more like a frankly, a not caring thing. Of like,
there's a lot of not
this
caring
movie needs
to this
to
movie.
move.
Yeah,
this movie needs to move. It is 90 minutes long. I do appreciate that within the runtime of the film, multiple times they're like, "Hey, we got about 90 minutes left. We got 75 minutes left," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, that's about right. Yep, you're right about that one."
So I talked about I think just the bad tonality of Mark Wahlberg's character because you didn't have to write him that way. You didn't you could write him to better fit with the movie. It's not like I don't know. It's fucked up. One last aspect of the film that I fucking hate is a little guy by the name of Hassan.
Oh, okay. Oh, you didn't like that? I thought he was funny.
And I hate the implementation of his character because she's like, okay, I need to talk to a pilot to figure out how to pilot this plane. Okay.
Yeah.
It also sort of undercuts some drama of the film that she is able to just like use helplines the entire film effectively.
Mm-hmm.
But they get this guy on the line. He's like, "Hi, I'm Hassan. How can I help you?" And she's like, "This is my situation. You know, there's a fucking killer in the back of this plane. We nearly crashed into a mountain." And he's like, "Okay. Hey, do you mind if I take you out to dinner? By the way?" I was like, "What the fuck? What the fuck is going on here?"
Yeah.
I mean, it really reeks to me of Mel Gibson being like, "Well, yeah, I have a lady main character, but I mean, she needs to have some romantic tension, right?"
Yeah.
Not really.
I agree with that.
She has a relatively strong character outside of having like a male suitor on the phone whom she needs to see and go on a dinner date with by the end of the movie. I just fucking hate that guy. He also like talks like a robot, and I think there is also some like weird like Indian call center joke that Mel Gibson is like circling with this thing. I don't know.
Yeah. That's a little bit hard to pin down. I slightly agree with you, but I think that for me, it worked for the comedic tone of the film, and also because what I continually read it as, not only because I think that their banter back and forth is like pretty solid dialogue, and I found that like their interactions charming, but I found it to be a tension breaker of this is a tense situation. He knows how dire it is. She is obviously in a high stress situation. She is piloting a plane which she's never done before, and it is weird that they choose to go the route of the romantic jokes of it, the dating jokes.
By the way,
yeah, that is definitely true.
Immediately, he's like, "Hey, can I take you out to dinner?"
But to me, the immediacy of it and the fact that they continue with it is to that point of the tension breaking thing of like, this is how you lower the stress. You distract a little bit with a little bit of funny banter. Mm-hmm. You make sure that their mind isn't totally on the fact that they're in a very dire situation. Listen. And so like, I actually liked it. I thought that it was a charming way to introduce an extra character and a new dynamic that brought in a little bit of a different tenor and flavor. Mm-hmm. And that they committed to it all the way through, to me, felt like a consistency thing of like, yeah, this is an element of the movie. And I honestly, it didn't bother me at all. I thought it was kind of fun.
Yeah, I don't know. His lines felt like weirdly condescending to me the whole time. It really started with like the whole he's pursuing her romantically thing that hit me the wrong way immediately. And point of order, I understand that functionally in the story he is meant to be a character who breaks the tension. But what's the most important for that is me, the film viewer, not feeling any tension in the movie, because as we've talked about, it is largely dramatically inert or unert, if we want to go back to that word. Like, I understand that
inert, but that is
exactly
inert is the opposite of inertia.
Damn. Inert. Oh, okay, well,
inert is stopped. Yeah.
Okay. That was the word I was looking for initially, but when I tried to turn it into inertia, I was like, but no, that's the good thing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's the forward thing. Yeah.
Anyway, Tucker, I didn't feel any tension in this movie. I understand that's what our characters are supposed to be feeling, but I didn't feel it because, as you said, the killer is restrained. We have the autopilot switch that is not even really an issue for most of the movie. We don't really like damage the technology of the plane or anything like that, where she has to be in control of it for long stretches of time. Instead, we also opt for this drama in the third act of like, well, who's the mole in the federal marshals? Is it voice on the phone 1 or voice on the phone 2? Which also felt totally misguided to me of them trying to like cram more drama into this story that should have innate drama to it. Trapped on plane with a killer in the mountains of Alaska. That premise is so perfect on its own, and it's incredible to me how badly mishandled it is in the film.
Yeah, well, it is interesting that the major tension, especially going into that last act, isn't really, though it's there, isn't really, we're running out of gas, we don't know how to fly a plane. Mm-hmm. That is actually the earlier drama to the movie of them at first trying to figure this out. But that is quickly answered, I agree. And then I found it a serviceable way to introduce new layers of tension to the film, and especially because, as I mentioned, I was pretty bought in on the writing side of Harris's history and her emotional conflicts and things, and I thought it was interesting to explore that a little bit further. There certainly are some screenwriting elements where, okay, she's just able to call anyone at basically any time, like that kind of undercuts a little bit of stuff, but her having to deal with this and not knowing what's going to happen when they land, I do think adds a little bit of like, there are just little chips of tension. Like, okay, they don't know how to fly the plane. Okay, you can solve that, but like if something goes wrong, that's still a major deal. The gas is running low. Yeah, it doesn't really matter from almost the entire movie, but it's still there.
Of course, the thing is that they're going to barely make it. Like that's what you write in the movie. And hey, they don't fuck that one up, thank God.
True. Yeah, and. So I agree on the whole that there are like a lot of undercutting tension moments, but to me, as I mentioned in the beginning, I actually preferred on a like performance and writing perspective the more downtime stuff that was kind of just the banter between either 2 or 3 of our characters and the sort of like just like back and forth nature of that. And so, and I do think that from a filmmaking perspective, yeah, it's more boring when it's just like 1 or 2 shots. Of course, you can't do too much. You're in a plane.
Well, yeah.
But I think it's actually I think the filmmaking is actually worse when we enter like an action sequence.
Well,
the camera's
that
like
is an issue for an action thriller, is it not?
No, definitely. But I found myself pleasantly surprised by the parts that aren't the action sequences, and then just like, yeah, okay, you're going through the motions when it was the action moments. But again, this is kind of like me, I guess, just like approaching the movie as what it is. Is like, yeah, it was sold to me as like this high tension thing. In reality, it's not really that. But I actually kind of enjoyed that was a little bit lower stakes, I guess. It's weird to say about like what the premise of this movie is, but I was able to appreciate it on its sort of lower stakes tone.
Yeah. So yeah, there you have it, folks. Flight Risk is best when it's at its low stakes moments.
Yeah. I think that's reasonable.
I mean, it feels. I think it just proves my point that Mel Gibson fucked this one up hardcore, trying to make a action thriller that is the worst in those elements. So, Tucker, 3.5 out of 10.
All right, I'll go 6.3 out of 10. I liked it. Thought it was a good movie. Would recommend to people. This is going to be a popular movie down the line, let me tell you. This is going to be everywhere on streaming and VOD. People are going to be watching the shit out of this. But I don't necessarily think that people are going to enjoy it like I did, because I certainly seem to be in the minority of people appreciating this movie for what it is. But there you have it, folks. That is our review of Flight Risk. We've analyzed the characters. We've analyzed the filmmaking. Oh boy, the themes. Yippee, it's Flight Risk. Happy January. We'll see you guys next time. I've got a DM from Linda on Twitter. It says, "This is the last asset I have left you, and I am compelled to give you this fund on the side of affection. If you still have feelings for your family, please take care of my little boy. Please don't contact me again in the future. I have already formed a new family, and I don't want my family to be disturbed."
What are you talking about?
Account CC8576, password UU8523,
Tucker,
balance $2,008,800,000.
$2 million USD?
Don't let. She doesn't want her family to be disturbed, Tanner.
I mean, so what is this woman compelling you to do? Just take the money and leave?
Tanner.
Yeah?
Linda has 0 followers and is following 0 people.
Tucker, she clearly made this burner account to contact you. What did you do to this poor woman?
If you still have feelings for your family, please take care of my little boy.
If you still have feelings for your family, take care of my child, but also leave my family alone?
This is probably the single best spam DM I've ever gotten.
I mean, that's incredible. That is incredible.